Hello, and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is a very different style of video than I'd normally be recording, and it could, in some sense, be uncomfortable. I don't know that it's actually going to be uncomfortable for the person I'm speaking to. It might actually be more uncomfortable for myself and even for the viewers of this video, because we're going to be speaking about sort of death and how death you you know the prospect of death can affect you, but also a faith journey or a journey away from faith involved in finding out you got terminal illness. So it's a real privilege to speak to Dan. Dan, welcome onto the channel, and thank you for agreeing to do this, because I know, well, it might not be easy, or you might be perfectly easy talking about this. I don't know.
Uh, Thanks for inviting me. I have no issues at all. It's just a source of good jokes.
Right, fair enough. I mean, yeah, that's the gallows humor, I suppose. So, I mean, you are speaking to me from a sort of hospital bed in your house. You are, you're bedridden. You have a terminal illness. Before we talk about anything, more abstract and what have you, do you want to just explain the condition that you have and how it's affected you, and maybe the journey, your health journey?
Right. Um, I had a normal life before. Um, I was uh, I was a prosecutor, and uh, everything was great. Then started having health issues. I had 3 strokes in 6 days, and a few years later, I started falling and passing out. And after some testing, they found out it was spinal stenosis. I've had 2 surgeries, and I barely survived the last one. Um, and spinal stenosis, the easiest way to describe it is to think of your spinal column, so the bones that join all your ribs and connect your head bone to your hip bone. Your spinal column is the tube, and your spinal cord is the main wire, and it then branches off to feed your lower back and your legs. And uh, the issue with spinal stenosis is in the channel.
Hmm.
You've got the spinal cord that's going through, but there's also calcium getting built around. So you're going to have buildup of calcium hard surfaces that are going to squeeze the spinal cord because it doesn't have the same amount of space, or there's going to be a jagged edge and it's going to pierce, pinch, or whatever it's going to do, and that's going to cause a lot of pain, and it's also going to cause paralysis.
So your central nervous system, which goes down your spinal column, is your messages from your brain. I know this, obviously this is kind of general knowledge, but like I have primary progressive multiple sclerosis, and in fact, where I've got scarification on my spinal cord, that is where my movement itself is affected in the same way that you're talking about. So it's the message system to your entire body gets affected, which stops those messages getting there.
Right. And uh, it also garbles up messages.
Mm.
So uh, if you stub your toe, well, at the beginning stages, you'll still have some sensation. So you'll stub your toe, but your brain will receive a signal that my toe was just uh, set on fire. So
Right.
instead of a bang kind of feel, you're going to feel like extreme heat, like you're being burnt.
Right.
So
Interesting.
it scrambles up the signals.
Yeah.
Uh, Eventually, it you just lose sensation, and that's a whole lot better than the pain.
Right. Okay.
You know,
So that's a weird situation where paralysis is a preferable situation than pain.
right. It's better to feel nothing than to feel pain. And,
Yeah.
you know, when it gets to a certain stage, it's going to affect closer and closer to your core. So the spinal cord in your neck, the discs in your neck, you've
Hmm.
got C1 to C7.
Hmm.
So like C6, C7, that's going to affect like toes, fingers, the extremities.
Hmm.
Then at C5, C6, it's going to be lower leg and lower arm. And just progressive as it gets to the core, which is your internal organs. And the step right above that is your autonomic system. So your brain's uh, automatic functions like pumping, telling your heart to pump, telling
Right.
your lungs to take a breath,
Hmm.
how to open your eyes, everything. So once C1, C2 is affected, you're done.
Yeah. And for this stenosis, I presume there, as your spinal column slowly sort of calcifies and constricts, the spinal cord within it. There is no there's no cure, well, no treatment for this.
No, that well, I've had two surgeries, one of the lower spine and one at the neck. Uh, but the thing is, they have to constantly be operating.
Yeah.
You know, they have to just sew me up with a zipper, so they can get access and do some scraping every year. And
Wow.
it's it's spinal, it's major surgery. It's not just like descaling at your dentist.
Right. Right. So I
Right.
suppose interesting. So in principle, you could have that every year for the rest of your life, and you would be able to continue living. Is that right, or is there a limit to how much I can
No,
do that?
no, because um, every time they operate, you're creating a lot of risk. And
Yeah,
I've had post-op infections with both because
yeah,
I'm also diabetic.
right.
And uh, like during the last surgery, it took the surgeon an extra 2 hours of surgery just to stop all of the hemorrhages.
Yeah,
Think of a cartoon. I think it was with Wile E. Coyote. There'd be a bust in the dam, and he put one finger there, but whoops, there's another, there's
yeah,
another, there's another. That's the way I was picturing my poor surgeon trying to go after
yeah.
one and the other.
So at some point, you realise that hang on, I've got this condition, and it's terminal. There's no cure for it, and you know, you realise the inevitable. How did you deal with that? Can you talk us through what you went through in that?
Well, at first, uh, it was pretty jarring. All of a sudden, you get a sell-by date stuck on your forehead, and at the time it was about 2 years. I've lost it longer,
Wow.
even though I don't want to last longer. I can't wait for this to be over. And
Wow. So we'll come and talk about that in a second, but yeah, carry on.
that's just from the pain. You know,
Yeah.
there's only so much uh, pain management that can be done because at a certain point, the more pain meds you add, the more you depress respiratory function. And I'm 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 very on I'm on the thin line right now.
Yeah, so there's always a trade-off, I guess, with, with
Right.
these kind of medications and the side effects that they bring with them. Yeah, I mean, were you told by sat down with the doctor? Then doctor said, here's your situation.
Surgeon, yeah, and it was just the surgeon is incredibly smart, but like many gifted surgeons, zero personality, zero social skills. He has a nurse to follow with him when he does rounds, just because he needs a buffer between him and the patient, you know? And for him, it was just like, oh, yeah, you're not, uh, the surgery went well, but you're not going to last long. I mean, 2 years maybe.
Wow.
And he then said something to the nurse to write in my file, and whew, they left. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Jeez. So,
But
so
he's
what
the
was
one
your?
that you want if you need surgery,
Oh yeah,
because
sure.
he usually operates on the brain. Like he's literally a brain surgeon, and he only did my surgery because I also had a cyst on the brainstem at the time, which is really, really rare. I'm one of those lucky guys. Like the type of cyst I had in my neck only happens. There's only one case in Canada per year, and in 2011, I was the grand prize winner. So
So then he, told you how it was and kind of left you to mull that over. What did you think at that point? What was going through your head? Can you remember?
uh, just stunned, I mean, uh, my partner was there with me, but I think he took it harder than I did.
Yeah,
Because when you start getting more and more health issues and they're more and more serious, you know, when you have a stroke at the age of 42, you have a pretty good clue that you're not you're not going for an extra long game.
yeah,
But all you have to the only solution to that is always make sure that you're working to leave your community, your family in a better situation than when you arrived.
yeah. Goodness. So then, I mean, aside from, we'll talk about your worldview in a bit, but you would have then had to have coped with this idea that, as you say, you got a sell by date on your head, which is, I guess, there's a couple of things that are going on there, which is you think, oh my goodness, I've only got so much longer to live. I need to live my best life. But that comes alongside having
Yeah.
deteriorating health, where you have an inability to do the things that you like. If someone said to a perfectly healthy person, "You got 2 years left to live," they go, "Right, I've got my bucket list. Okay, like I'll go through this kind of psychological analysis of how I feel and all this and go through all like psychological stuff, and then it's like, right, let's see what I can do and let's live my best life now." But you say to someone with terminal illness where they're deteriorating in health, well, that is far more difficult. So it's actually been quite a quick deterioration then.
Right. Like just yesterday, my left hand stopped working. So it's like, is this going to be something temporary? Is it something new I have to adapt to? And
Yeah,
you never know what's going to happen. Well, during the day, even because of my condition, I pass out a lot, and it's
yeah,
not like falling asleep or anything like that. It's unconsciousness. Uh, if you know the Glasgow scale of consciousness, It's from 0 to 5, and like at 5, you're in a coma.
Yeah.
And I've been brought to the hospital many times at level 4 or 5, you know,
Right.
and been revived a few times. That burns. It's mostly that's the part that I'm having trouble adapting to. The
Right.
pain, I know it's there, and there's nothing I can do with it. You know, you just suffer. It's not like you have an option B. But I also lose consciousness, which means I also fall a lot. And it could be like 3 times a day. And it you get pretty sore after a while, you know.
Yeah.
You can't wrap yourself in a bubble suit. So and like when I pass out, I don't have any muscle control either, so I
So
fall
you're not
face
putting your
first.
hands out or anything like that. Yeah.
No. It's face first. Uh, like I've broken 5 pairs of glasses in the last 2 years.
Wow.
So my optician likes me though.
so so are you presently bedbound, or because I said you're bedbound earlier, but
Yeah.
you're now bedbound, right? How have you found coming to terms with this in terms of sort of depression and keeping your chin up and all this kind of stuff? How has your psychological journey been over the last couple of years?
Well, I have a few different chins, so as long as I keep one of them up, I'll be okay. Um, I've always been a fan of Jerry Lewis. It's not my fault. Um, I'm sorry, I forgot that question.
So, like, how's your psychological journey been? How have you dealt with
Okay, right.
ideas of
Okay.
depression, or have you kept yourself going psychologically?
Well, I'm lucky because I never went through the whole why me. It's got to be somebody, you know. And if it happens to you, analyze it as much as you want. You still have to deal with it, you know. So I was never a why me kind of person.
Right.
It's exactly the opposite. I find myself lucky, super lucky, because when I was in the hospital for my surgery, this my surgeon, like I said, he's usually operating on brains. So he has a wing of the hospital just for his patients, and because it's a well-renowned hospital too that specializes in like advanced neurosurgery like that and cancer surgery. And when I saw his patients walking up and down the aisle, and they don't put dressings anymore, they want everything to air dry, you know. So there were people there that had pieces of their skull missing because it has to swelling has to shrink or something like that before they can put the plate back, and all kinds of cases like that. And it's like, oh wow, oh wow, oh wow, I am so glad I've got my thing, you
And
know.
not their thing. So that's weird. So interesting. So like you've got the whole scale of how good to bad, and you realize that you're in this like scale. You're in this scale here, and you think, right, I'm here. Rather than going, oh, woe is me, how terrible. It's like, yeah, well, at least I'm not this guy here. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And
And
so it's looking on the bright side there.
yeah, well, and we've all had family members and friends die from cancer and go out in a pitiful death. And I know that won't be the case for me. When
Interesting.
the autonomic system goes, I'm just gonna fall asleep and that's it.
Yeah.
No big deal. I'm not gonna feel it.
Yeah.
And after, I'm certainly not going to feel it.
Yeah.
So what have I got to worry about?
As
Okay.
you as you're living out these sort of final, I don't know how long, I don't know what unit of time to give there. These final units of time in your
Months.
life,
Yeah.
months. What do you find you're filling your days with then?
YouTube, and I've also been working on my family tree for the past 33 years roughly. And now I'm just writing a book of the family tree, of like my branch of it. So it'll be up to my grandparents, and down from there, I'll have the rest of the information, but it's going to concentrate like on first cousins, you know.
Yeah,
And I just want to get that out before I go out,
yeah,
you know. And
yeah,
that'll be my legacy, and also the volunteering I've done in the community. So I feel like I've contributed. I would have liked maybe to contribute longer, but it is what it is. I'm not
yeah,
gonna have a tantrum to who.
yeah. Well, in fact, we'll get onto that now. But yeah, YouTube, as you said, is a huge resource, isn't it, to suck your time? I know that because I'm a content creator and avid consumer. I'm both. I spend, oh, goodness me, YouTube has half of my life. But that's how we came to speak to each other, because you actually watching my Ukraine war channel, and we spoke through that. So thank you for watching that. Um, okay, let's move on to your worldview, as it was. So what's your journey in life, and what's your background and in kind of beliefs?
I was raised Roman Catholic
Hmm.
and went to Catholic school, the whole kit, with the nuns and their wooden rulers that they snap at the end of your desk, and uh, the superhuman nuns that were able to, they were like 3 foot tall, but they could lift someone 9 feet in the air type of thing, you know? Cartoon
Classic.
versions. Uh, so it went through that traditional thing, but my parents were never, like, we didn't go on weekends, like for the Sunday service. And we just lived like that. Nothing, it wasn't a central part of our lives, you know?
Hmm.
And never really attended mass other than uh, baptisms and funerals. So it's true, they get you coming and going. And uh, I went to college, did my school and all that. And a few years ago, when I started having health issues, that's when I decided that, you know, maybe I should uh, maybe I should explore that journey more. Uh, so I even joined the Knights of Columbus, which is a fraternity order of Catholic men, um, and I was going to church 5 days a week.
Wow. So let's get this straight. So when you were first having your health issues, that did that lead you to think, oh my goodness, I need comfort in this, or I need to feel like someone can cure this and help me, and therefore, is that what sort of helped push you towards that kind of religious environment, or am I
Well,
wrong?
at the time, I was also dealing. My brother had just died. I was struggling coming out as gay. Uh, I was having a lot of health issues. I had a few organs close to shut down at the time, you know. So I was just dealing with a lot, and it was more like I knew I wouldn't be cured, but to to cope.
Mm.
You know,
Mm.
I was looking for comfort. You know,
And this is the thing about religion. Say what you like, it offers you that, or the belief in God, I guess.
false
Well, and religious
false
communities
comfort.
can. Yeah, and where something like atheism, there's literally like, oh, shit happens, I'm going to die, and there you go. There's nothing, there's no one you can appeal to. There's no kind of like at night or whenever, just like having that comfort of prayer and
But it's a false comfort. That's the thing.
well,
And when you realize that, and when you start to look at it logically instead of emotionally, whoa.
so okay, that's that. Well, then, so you're in this position where you were involved with this particular Catholic movement. How did that evolve?
Like I'm from a small community of about 5,000, and our community is roughly half and half French and English. Uh, I'm sure you've noticed an accent. Uh, my my first language is French, um, and most of the Catholic men in town are part of the Knights of Columbus. So it's mostly social more than religious,
Right.
you know, because out of quite a few hundred, we only had maybe a dozen that were Bible thumpers,
Right.
you know, and that wasn't too bad to tolerate.
But you were nonetheless, you were a believing Christian, so to speak,
At the
at
time,
this
yeah,
at this time. Yeah.
yeah. And after about, I think it was about a year or two, I left the Knights of Columbus, and uh, that was it. I stopped having uh, going to mass the 5 days a week, or even I just stopped going to church completely. And because after a certain time, if you don't see results, you're not going to see results.
Just to understand here, you were having progressive health issues at this time, is that right?
Right?
And you were seeing uh, this relationship with God, or your perception of this relationship with God as, one where you were asking for some kind of,
Comfort.
help and comfort with your condition, but there was nothing forthcoming. Did you feel like you had some relationship? Did you feel like there was anything, you were getting anything back at all?
No, and I was noticing that it's always the same people that are in church. There's no variation, and I guess it made me think, if it's so great, why, and if it's so effective, why does our huge church, because it probably holds, oh, I'd say probably close to 1,000 people, and for our size town, that's a big church.
Yeah.
And if you have 200 people, you're doing really good, like for a Sunday service.
Yeah.
So it's like there's something I'm not seeing, or there's something that they're not seeing. And I was discouraged because I wasn't getting the comfort from attending the church and all that, and it didn't help that the mass was also read by a convicted pedophile priest. So, you
Uh,
know, and
that's yeah,
that
that's never a good thing.
that's now that I think of it, it's probably because of him that I stopped attending the church, because he wasn't the one that was supposed to be saying mass, but all of a sudden he started replacing, and When he do it, usually I just stand up as he was passing so that he'd notice me, and I just stand up, stare at him as he's walking down the aisle, and I'd leave the church. I couldn't stand him. He's finally dead, at least, but I
You see,
refused to
sorry.
be preached by a child molester,
Mm.
and that's when I think the first click went in. That it's like, hold on, I'm not getting the comfort that I'm asking for. I'm a good person. I've always tried to help others. And then you've got this sleazeball of a child molester that because he's got a white collar, he gets a safe pass.
Mm.
He did a very short jail sentence for like 50 or 60 victims. Uh, and a lot of the victims I knew. Um, it just doesn't seem fair, and that's yeah.
Mm.
I think that was the trigger.
Interesting. That altogether meant that you were in a good position to start questioning more and thinking more kind of, I guess, philosophically about this. You were telling me that you happened across a Christopher Hitchens video. Was that one of these like key moments for you?
When I stopped attending church, I just like turned it off. Didn't think about it again until about a year and a half ago, because it was actually 2 years ago. It was February 2 years ago, and I was watching a Christopher Hitchens video on YouTube because now I wasn't working anymore. I was bedridden, and uh, during one of his interviews, it was like,
Sorry to interrupt. Is this to say you'd given up your belief in God, or you still had a belief in God but didn't really think about it?
I still had the belief in God,
Right.
but I didn't want to deal with it anymore. So
Mm.
I put it on the shelf. It's
Right.
like out of mind. But in the back, every once in a while, when you're in a lot of pain, you, you know,
Yeah.
your belief or your leftover belief kind of want to pokes itself. It wants to poke itself into your reality right now, but
Yeah.
you got to keep it at bay. But I was watching Christopher Hitchens, and he made a whole lot of sense. He gave a lot of arguments that was like, I never thought of that. I never thought of that. All of a sudden, a big spotlight had just lit up. And as soon as I finished that debate, I probably watched like 10, 12 hours of this debate. Poof, all at once. I was hungry for what else he had said, you know? And it's like was incredible. And after that, I saw a video with Matt Dillahunty, and that was it. Between
Sidebar
those
here.
two, I had no doubts at all.
Sidebar here. I was having an email conversation with Matt Dillahunty last night. But yeah, so he's the host of the Atheist Experience and has now done, heaps of debates himself. Very interesting. And he's debated people like Jordan Peterson as well. Really interesting guy. And as you were mentioning earlier before we would start recording, how you've seen his development over the kind of time period that he's been recording.
Right? Like he was with the Atheist Experience for about 15 or 16 years. In the last year, he left, and now he's with the Line with Jimmy Snow,
Right.
and but it's incredible how he has become so logical. Before he was just the no BS kind of guy at the start of the series, and now he's a logic kung fu. I mean, he just cuts right down to the issue and says why it's logical or not with the reasoning just makes sense. And it's just incredible that a lot of it's things that you may have thought before, but you never gave it serious thought. It's like, yeah, I wonder how come that never matched. And you just let it go. But now that you're examining everything, it's like, So I started to. I have two brothers and my mom that are still alive. Uh, I started talking to them because I was going through my advanced directive planning. So in Canada, that's where you can put all your what you're willing to accept and not willing to accept in advance as for treatment or life extension. And uh, it's also guidance for your substitute decision maker or power of attorney. And so while doing this with my brothers, belief and all that came up because I had pre-planned my funeral too. And neither of them believed anymore. So it's like, oh,
Interesting.
okay. But we had never discussed it. Like, I'm 54 and my brothers are 59 and 60. So it's not like we just haven't had time. It just never popped up. And then a few weeks later, I was talking to my mom and it came up and she doesn't believe either. So it's like, holy cow. I was carrying the ghost for the family or something. So I gave up the ghost.
Right.
I
You
guess I
gave
was
up the Holy Ghost.
yeah, I was the last one to let go.
Wow. So, what did you? How did your condition interact with your kind of delving into your belief? Did it make more sense? Did your condition make more sense considering atheism or theism?
I don't really, I don't think it has much of an impact because uh, at at the time that I was going to the church so often, I wasn't terminal yet. It was
Right.
just serious issues, but dealt with it and uh, went back to a normal life. But uh, once I became terminal, I had I hadn't my beliefs. Well, I guess they hadn't changed yet, but I wasn't thinking about them at all. They were just like on that shelf in pause mode. So I had already accepted my death when I discovered Christopher Hitchens.
Right.
But the difference was, like, I had already written out my eulogy and I had made references that, I was going to be playing pool and having beer with my dad and my brother. And it was after that I saw Christopher Hitchens and the whole bright light. It wasn't heaven, that bright light. It was a light bulb and reality. Uh, that um,
That's interesting. So you would have had initially this kind of comfort. Again, it goes back to comfort. So some people call this sort of terror management theory, and the idea it's called mortality salience. So the being aware of your death and how that affects understanding of life going forwards and how you deal with that. And some people deal with the terror of death by being comforted by heaven and eternal life, right? And that's like, oh, it's okay to die because I've got that, and therefore I feel comforted, and it alleviates that existential terror. But for you, you had that, and then you're like, that's what I believe. Now I'm rejecting it, and I've got this understanding of my mortality, and I've got terminal illness, but I don't believe in God. Right. So now, how did you feel about dying, about not having heaven to look forward to?
Right. Okay. Yeah. Now I see the confusion. Yeah, because I was a believer, but I wasn't terminal. When I became terminal, I accepted my diagnosis without
Yeah,
relying on religion
yeah,
or anything else, and now I'm at peace, but without religion.
yeah.
It is kind of a strange journey. I've always been special.
But
Um,
But what is it that gives you the peace? I mean, that's interesting choice of words because you're at peace, but you don't have the peace of. So, say you're a religious believer, you'd be at peace because possibly because you'd be comforted by the fact that hey, I'm at peace. I can deal with this because I've got something beautiful to go to. But you're at peace now, and you don't have that end comfort. What? How do you feel at peace?
well, actually, I find that the idea of heaven never really made much sense to me because there's too many inconsistencies. It just so to all your relatives, you appear 5,000 different age ages to them, and there's a lot of stuff that didn't really make sense. So I didn't make a big thing of that. And for comfort, being in a box with nothing, the absence of everything, nothingness, that is comforting. I find that more comforting than the thought of a heaven because it really will be peace. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
it's you did your bit, and as a reward, you get peace. No one's going to bother you. You were done. You know, let
Interesting.
let the bugs eat on. Well, actually, I'm going to be cremated, but
Because I find it quite interesting how people can deal with things like terminal illness in this case, but you can also think of that in terms of the problem of evil. So, what's the problem of evil? The problem of evil is why is there so much suffering in the world, given that God is supposedly all loving, all knowing, and all powerful? So, God would want to do something about it, being loving. Would know what to do about it, being all knowing and powerful enough to be able to do something about it, being all powerful, but that suffering still exists. So some people see things like, I don't know, let's say the earthquake in Turkey, that's Turkey and Syria just now, and say, right, there are two ways of looking at that. You can say the only way of making sense of this is it happens for a reason, right? And the reason is God. So I can't make sense. The universe just can't be that unfair and terrible. So therefore, it's happening for a reason. And then you make up a reason as what that might be, that what God might want, and that's called a theodicy, right? But then the other sort of person will go, that's horrific, and I can't make sense of that in light of God, so therefore God doesn't exist. And you can just interpret that same data in two different ways. And it's exactly the same with a terminal illness, which is like, well, this can either be happening for a reason, and God has a plan for me, and for some reason He's using me as some tool to get some greater good or whatever, or this is just really shit, and in light of sort of design and an all-loving God, and so therefore it's unlikely that God exists given my condition. Did you ever think of things like the problem of evil? Have you ever thought about the fact that you're in the position you are, and if there was a God, why would that be? Even how you felt about whether God was being unfair, type thing.
yeah. Well, for the fairness, I guess the thing that I always thought was there, like the priest wasn't being fair when he was preaching because anything good that would happen would be because God is great. And when anything bad happens, it's because humans are lousy. So it's
Classic.
like
Yeah.
heads, you win. Tails, I win.
Tails you
Yeah,
lose.
no, yeah, yeah,
Heads you win, tails I lose. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So that's been an issue I've
That's
had for
such a
years and
powerful
years.
argument. Yeah, that's such a powerful argument. It's so true that and it honestly that infuriates me. It's like how wonderful the world is. As soon as the world is wonderful, God is great. God is great. Hang on, this is awful. Like plate tectonics, earthquakes. Oh, it must be because God cannot be at fault because God is omni, and it has to be all this all loving thing. God cannot be at fault. If God can't be at fault for all these design issues and for suffering and for this and that, then who else can be at fault? It's the humans' fault. But didn't God design and create the humans? Yeah. But it's still the humans' fault.
Yeah, because we have free will. It's um, when Christopher Hitchens famously answered, "Do I believe in free will? Of course I do. I have no other choice."
Classic. Classic.
It's, but like I watch QI. Actually,
Yeah.
it's British show, and I remember quite a few times where Stephen Fry would they had a question about a certain ant where there was something that would burrow through it, and I remember a few times it's like, is this your all loving God? And it's like, way to go, Stephen. And it all falls to the hypocrisy. The hypocrisy from all the rest of church teachings, doctrine, internal management, everything falls down to the hypocrisy, and it starts with that whole you win or I lose.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense. You either take the good with the bad, or you're not. You're not a part of the equation.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing. There is no other part of the equation.
I would have to, of course, agree with you. I'm going to be a bit cheeky here, Dan. I wrote a book called 30 Arguments Against the Existence of God, Heaven, Hell, Satan, and Divine Design. And in this book, actually, I talk about how heaven and hell are really problematic ideas. And in fact, divine design is problematic. So there's all these examples of very poor design. And how would you, and you talked about Stephen Fry there. There's the great naturalist David Attenborough. So David Attenborough, who does loads of nature shows in the UK, you probably know him.
Yep.
And he famously, when he's asked about God, he talks about, well, I look at the worm that burrows in the eye of this South American boy or whatever swimming in it in the Amazon. It burrows in his eye and he goes blind. And I think, is that the work of an all-loving God type thing? I'm paraphrasing, but yeah, exactly that. It's just.
If there is a God, then he's looking at us with a magnifying glass saying, burn, baby, burn.
Well, yeah, well, I mean, that sounds facetious, but to be honest, like looking through a magnifying glass at the horrific earthquake in Turkey, and just thinking, well, I'm not going to do anything about that. Evidently, that's for a greater good. And as you say, get on with it, burn, baby, burn. What you can do. I'm looking to see what you're going to do, but I'm not going to stand in hell. 240,000 people in the tsunami in 2004 dying. Not a lot of activity there. For God. But so yes. Anyway, sorry, I am I'm digressing and starting to go ranty. As we sort of meander to the end, Dan, I really appreciate this and your candid answers to the question.
The end. Are you my
No.
end or of the stream?
Well, I hope not. Goodness, that would be quite depressing. And the interview comes to an end because Dan has shuffled off his mortal coil. I would feel awful. So please don't do that. Not yet. So you obviously, the clock is ticking for you, but it's ticking for us all. I've written a few pieces on, like, think about my own mortality recently, as a few of my friends have passed away, and as you get older, these things, you think about it more. What is the thing you think about most at the moment as you're sort of cogitating the universe?
I'm looking forward to the peace and the end of the pain. So, because we have a program in Canada, well, euthanasia. It's called medical assistance in dying, and spinal stenosis is one of the conditions that will qualify you for assistance in dying.
That's interesting. Euthanasia was actually something I meant to speak to you about. So, yeah, how do you feel about euthanasia? And have you decided that there's a point? Well, can you have access to that? I know you said stenosis is one thing that will qualify you, but is that kind of an easy thing for you to access? And B, at what point have you decided at what point that might be the case?
Uh, I talked about it with my doctor, and I've got you need to have two doctors that support your decision, and then you just have a 12-day waiting period, and you can schedule it. You can have it done either at the hospital, or a doctor and a nurse will come to your home and put you in La La Land. And it's a good program. It was just approved, I think it was in 2016.
Oh wow! So it's relatively new.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. That's that's why. While watching one of your streams, I think it was yesterday, for Ukraine, and I was just thinking, you know what? The Russians, their recruiting posters should be join Russian army, or with a new logo on it, Dignitas Ukraine. uh, they're just having their soldiers put asleep. That's all it is.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting way of looking at it.
More direct advertising.
Yeah, terribly sad, actually. Really.
Yeah,
People. Do you have two doctors having approved that?
Yep.
Have you? Yeah. So, what's your trigger then? Is there a particular point where you say,
when I can't manage the pain anymore?
right? Okay.
Right now, it gets very close. So
Right.
some, well, just like with your MS, you've got good days and bad days. And in your bad days, they're bad. Most people have no clue what levels of pain are possible, and I hope they never find out. But
Wow.
when you do get to the end, sometimes you just want to end it like ASAP, because you're not sure if you want to even suffer till the morning.
And I guess you're free to have those thoughts and calculations in your mind without someone saying, well, it's a sin, or it's a bad thing, it's like suicide and that's a sin, that kind of thing. You're
It's
just
still
able.
suicide. It's still suicide. Just legalized.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But theologically, there's no kind of there's no feeling of guilt, or the fact that you'll be punished for doing the wrong thing, that kind of thing.
No,
because there's no God. It's
I
basically what I'm
haven't
saying.
heard of anyone having their service refused or anything like that. It's pretty common. Like, even in our small town, there's at least one per month.
Wow.
So it makes sense. Why put someone through? Why put someone through the suffering that you wouldn't allow your pet?
Yeah,
You know,
that's a
because
really
like I
good
was
point.
telling my mom, if I was a dog, someone would have been arrested for letting me suffer. You know,
That's a really good point. You put your dog down. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do get that.
and you'd be considered a monster if you didn't.
Yeah.
You know, you don't just let an animal suffer. You take it out of its misery. So why are humans less valuable than a beloved pet? Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
You know, it's when you take off the layer of BS, the layer that you impose on yourself, that there's this whole celestial level. No, that's just fog. I mean, put it away. It doesn't exist. You know.
Well, it's really interesting to see your clarity as you come towards the end of your life, and I guess that means that you can, you know, evaluate things as they really are. You know, there's no other thing that's constraining your thought processes. You're just free to think what you like, free to believe, free to evaluate things as you see fit, and
A lot of
it's
time to contemplate.
yeah. Yeah, I bet. Well, look, I absolutely appreciate this. It's a real privilege to speak to you, Dan, in your position now, and to try and get an understanding of what you're going through and how that's also interacted with your sort of beliefs as well. I appreciate that a lot. Do you have any final words for the audience or for this video?
I find it so funny
Again,
when you
it's not your
call me the
final words,
final
mate. It's
word.
not your final words. Just,
Yeah,
I'm
just
telling you,
you know,
don't. You've got months left. Come on, mate.
no, I just love having like two of my best friends are funeral directors. I mean, it just happens like that. I've known them for years and years, so uh, we have really morbid jokes.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. Yeah.
They're fun. Um, just enjoy the time you have. Make sure that uh, you join the community, that you make your community and your family better off than they were before they met you or before you came around. You know, always try to improve whatever corner you're in, and always try to help the others, because uh, that's just human nature. Don't fight it. Help someone, and while you're helping someone, you're also not getting into trouble.
That's a lovely humanist ideal, which is, it's not about thinking, oh, it's all about what comes after, right? Which is, I think, the whole religious thought thing. It's all about heaven and
Yeah.
hell, avoiding hell and getting into heaven. So everything I'm doing is just to get there. Where it's like, no, I'm here. This is all I've got. So let's try and do good in this here life to improve
Without an
this here.
ulterior motive, because
Exactly.
if you're religious, you're not doing it to help that person. You're doing it for brownie points, for your sky daddy. Well, that's that's really screwed up. The motivation should be for the good itself.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's an argument I include in that book I talked about. I think that's such an important. God, I could speak for half an hour on what you just said. Actually, is like, so it's really hard to be truly moral and not to be self-centered when you have like heaven and hell sitting here. If that's what you believe, it ends up being these ulterior motives, like you were just saying, that really kind of influence your behavior, and therefore it's all about you rather than being all about making this better. But yeah, anyway, I digress. Look, thanks, Dan. Really appreciate that, mate. And you take care of yourself. And long may we continue talking in the different forums that we do.
Sounds great. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks,
Bye,
man.
all.